Hey everybody, it's Derek here. Welcome to the Weekly Games News Recap for 10th to 18th of May 2021. Not a whole lot to talk about this week, just because there wasn't anything particularly interesting happening. But we'll get into it, I suppose. So, Sony has been talking to some developers, and some news about their new VR system has leaked out. So, next-gen PlayStation VR is reportedly 4K, has vibration motor and foveated rendering. So, this is all sources coming from Upload VR, who are all fairly big and fairly focused in VR spaces. So, the new PSVR2, or whatever they end up calling it, has gaze tracking, has foveated rendering, has a lens separation adjustment dial, and has a vibration motor. So, going through all of those, gaze tracking basically is there's cameras inside the headset that will look at your eye to see where you are looking. So, tracking your gaze. And then foveated rendering basically means they're only going to render in high definition the stuff you're actually looking at. And anything that is outside of that is kind of blurred. It has less horsepower on it, has less rendering. So they're basically checking where you're looking, and wherever you're looking is getting the most graphical fidelity, and everywhere else is getting less. Obviously, if you are streaming your vision or something like that to like TV or to like Twitch or to YouTube or something like that, you're gonna get kind of like a blurry outline on it. So it'll look really good for whoever has the helmet on, but whoever doesn't have it on probably won't look that great. Lens separation adjustment dial is as simple as it sounds. Some people have their eyes are a little closer or a little further apart or whatever, and that just lets you adjust them so that you can get a more focused. Vibration motor, I don't know about. It's like, do I really want vibration in my headset? Already a lot of people get headaches from VR, and they want to add vibration on top of that. Some people are going to be just throwing up wearing this thing. Some not great news, but I mean, it's better than the current setup, but it will connect to the PS5 using a USB Type-C. Most of the connections on the front, there's only 2 connections on the front of the PS5. One of them is a Type-C. I think there's one at the back as well. Obviously this would be considerably better if it was wireless. I get why it's not. They're going to use the PS5 to actually do the processing and just push the image out to the headset, which is fine, I guess. It's certainly better than the PSVR setup, which has like 8 cables or something. It's something ridiculous anyway. It's got its main power cable, and then that connects to the console, and then there's a bit that connects to the TV, which obviously you don't need to use, but then there's a bit that connects to the processing unit, and then that has a bunch of cables attached to it, and they all need power. It's a real pain in the hole. One cable, that's not a big deal. Obviously it'd be better if it was wireless, but no, it's not a big deal. Question though is, it's obviously not getting mains power, so is it also getting power through that cable? Or is it something that needs to be charged separately? Don't know. One cable can't really do all of it, so it's a real question of what happens. Later on down the line, they just basically point out there's a lot of development underway on the new VR system, so it won't be launching this year. So wait for it 2022, probably like Christmas 2022, I imagine. Small update. Ubisoft has delayed Skull and Bones again. It's been delayed 4 times now. Developers working on it are at this stage are themselves Skull and Bones. Not much to talk about here. It's just, I don't think they know what to do with the game. It's like being positioned as like a PvP thing, and then they wanted to make it like a hero thing where you would have like specific ships have like specific abilities and things like that. Then you would, I think they ended up wanting to do like an actual campaign for it too as well, and it's like they don't know what they want to do with the game. So I'm not surprised it's been delayed yet again. I can't imagine there are too many people ever expecting it to come out at this stage. New releases this week, Mass Effect Legendary Edition. So if you have somehow not played any of the Mass Effect games yet, you can now, I guess. I'd be interested to see how well Mass Effect 1 holds up. I imagine 2 and 3 hold up pretty well. they still play like a lot of cover shooters, so I'd imagine they're still fine. Mass Effect 1 was a bit ropey even when it came out, so it would be interesting to see how well it plays now. And then Call of the Sea is like, this has been out for a while on Xbox and PC. I'm only pointing it out because it hasn't come out on PlayStation, and I play mostly on PlayStation, so I would be interested to play it myself. Why aren't you going away, mouse cursor? You're making me look stupid. This is a kind of... It's a bit of like a walking sim with puzzles and stuff, but it's also like somewhat eldritch horror. And it's sort of what I wanted The Sinking City to be. It's what I wanted Moons of Madness to be, which they didn't quite turn out that way, but this one looks like it's more the kind of thing I was hoping those games would be. So I'll be interested to give that a shot at some point whenever I get through my backlog, whenever that happens to be. Okay. So everyone's favorite part of the weekly news roundup, it's time to talk about how shit the industry is. In this thing that I really love is unfortunately run by people who shouldn't be running it. But anyway, so this is more of like a roundup of last week. This is basically everything that's happening in the Apple versus Epic case. So Kotaku have a big rundown of all the stories that they did, like lots of different stories. Some stuff that I talked about, and there's some stuff in there that I didn't talk about because I just didn't find it particularly interesting. But it's all there. This link I'll drop in the description if you want to catch up on it. Or if you want to dig deeper into it, there's lots here, and they have their own sources highlighted as well. So you can check that out too. Going back to the Housemarque save issue, so Housemarque have come out to say that, yeah, we're looking into it, but we haven't decided on what we're going to do. And this is kind of, it's just the way they're presenting it that I really don't like. So if you're not familiar, we talked about it the last 2 weeks, I think, but Returnal is a roguelike. You're expected to die a lot and get sent back to the beginning. It's like it's part of its game loop. It's part of its design. The problem with Returnal is that individual runs or individual sessions go on for a really long time. Sessions can last too long, sometimes several hours, and there's no means to stop and save outside of keeping the PS5 console in sleep mode, which is not great. Like, it's not ideal. It's eating up energy. You don't know when you'll actually get back to it. Like, this somewhat assumes you'll be playing it again the next day. That rarely happens. Like I have a day job, other things to do during the time that I have off. I have to do these videos and stuff. I run like campaigns, and that's I'm fairly into like video games and stuff. So I would have the time to do it, but most people won't. Like, they'll play it on the weekend maybe. If they have kids, it might be every second weekend or something, maybe even less. You can't leave the console on for that length of time. Like, you just can't do it. I don't understand why they don't have. I don't understand how they didn't see this as a problem during development. But it's this part here. It's like they're having an issue trying to figure out how to implement the save system. And it's not like a technical thing. It's that they don't know, that he believed it was complicated by different players having different expectations. What player has the expectation that I need to leave my console on forever? What player has that expectation? I don't get it. What expectation is he talking about? Like, there are so many games that have a hardcore mode, which is basically roguelike. Like, it might as well be, where either you can save and exit. Right, that's the only way you can save, is by leaving the game, and it will save your progress there, and when you load it back in, it'll wipe that save out. Like, that's fairly typical hardcore game modes. There's the other way. The other like roguelike thing is that most roguelike runs don't last very long. They're less than an hour usually, so it's not that big a deal. If like there's a crash or something, like, it sucks, but it's not that big a deal because it's only less than an hour. Like, you could do it again. Whereas Returnal runs tend to last like 3 or 4 hours. That's shitty to lose all that progress. The other way to do it is to attempt the Dark Souls position, which is you have one autosave. You can't manually save. The game saves for you, and it saves constantly. Now, obviously, Dark Souls has the thing that you can bomb around different like checkpoints, stuff like that, which wouldn't even be a problem for Returnal because you're just going straight back to the beginning. Like, they could easily have that autosave Dark Souls allows you no access to it, and any game that apes Dark Souls or mimics it does the same thing. Like, there's a lot of different ways you could do it. You could have a, like, let me manually save, but when I die, that save goes away. That, like give me that option. And if they're having an issue that there are different players having different expectations, whatever those expectations are, make it optional then. Make it a little tick at the beginning, like, yeah, autosave for me, or unlock manual saves, or if you manual save, you lose points or something. Like, I don't get it. I don't get what the problem is. And they're being coy about it doesn't help. Like, if they wanted to actually outline what they feel are the complications and, like, tell people, like, I'm pretty sure a save thing is coming. It's just a question of what it's going to look like and how long it'll take, and how much longer I have to put off playing Returnal before then. Okay, it's that time of an industry bullshit where we shit on Google Stadia, but it looks like we might not be shitting on Google Stadia for much longer, despite what Nate Ahern of Stadia's developer marketing might have to say. So there was an interview with GameIndustry.biz by Stadia's developer marketing lead Nate Ahern, who basically said, I'm kind of curious if it was unsolicited, but he basically said, Stadia's fine, nothing to see here, we're all doing great. When asked what Google Stadia was doing that proves it's actually alive and well, he pointed out that loads of games are being added. We continue to make Stadia a great place to play games on the device, which is not an answer. That's PR speak. When they pushed him on it, he just threw out some more gibberish, focused on delivering value for our partners on behalf of our players. This, again, they're not metrics, these are platitudes and PR speak. It means nothing. The most recent development for Google Stadia was giving their service a search bar. That's right, a Google service. Google famously just Google it for, like, a search engine. It still didn't have a save bar or a search bar on Stadia, and even then, apparently, it doesn't work very well. It's just it's just par for the course for Google half-assing all of their products. They're firmly on top. They don't need to give a shit about anything, and they just half-ass it. Like, I'm not surprised. They came in thinking they could swing their big Google dick around on video games, and it clearly has not happened. There's no metrics on how many players are on Google Stadia. We don't know how well it's doing, how many players they've gained, how many players they've lost, because they don't release those numbers, and they're not available anywhere. You can see it on Steam for, like, number of players playing this game, and you can, like, trend it. Like, there's like a graph you can see, and you can see, oh, players are dropping off, oh, guess that game's dying, or oh, a big spike in that game's super popular, or whatever. And obviously you can just total up all of those and see this many people play on Steam. Like, it's like, you can do it. To be fair, I don't know if PlayStation, Xbox do the same thing, but I don't think they need to, because their success more or less speaks for itself. And then, as Zach Schwiesen points out, there's the Google Graveyard. If you're not familiar, these are a bunch of services that Google has killed over time. Go away. So there's tons of them here. Android will almost certainly appear. Look at this. Look at that scroll bar on the side. Look how fucking big this is. All the services Google has killed off. So the ones with the guillotines they're on their way out. Like, officially they're gonna die soon. And the ones with the gravestones they're dead. There's some really good services in there that are dead. And I'm imagining Google Stadia is gonna slot in nicely on top of this ad at some point. Anyway, moving on. Ubisoft will now brand all its own games as Ubisoft Originals. So this is really just a big PR marketing thing. Like, it's pointed out then what exactly makes a game an Ubisoft Original, despite Ubisoft having no original games. Moving forward, the Ubisoft Original mention is attached to all of Ubisoft's games created in-house by our talented developers. Now, Ubisoft do not publish any game that they don't make. far as I'm aware. They might do it in Japan or something like that, or outside of Europe. I think they do some publishing, but for the vast majority, the games that are published by Ubisoft are developed by Ubisoft Development. So having this Ubisoft original thing makes no sense. Like every game is an Ubisoft original. In that case, it doesn't mean anything. It's just stupid. Not to mention that have they had an original game in the last, like they obviously have with like Watch Dogs or The Division or whatever. Like they had their Division 1 is 6 years old now. Watch Dogs I think is something similar. Assassin's Creed is like older than time itself. I don't know, but I suppose it was an original at one point. And it's just I can't think of their last original IP from like more than 2 or 3 years ago. I'm sure there is one, I just can't think of it. Skull and Bones, if it ever comes out, I suppose that'll be one. Okay, sex game can't get on Steam even after 20k worth of attempts. So this story in and of itself is kind of shitty. This is a developer of a game called Holodecks, which is a sort of photogrammetry VR game that uses photogrammetry scans of real sex workers. It's meant to be like super ethical or whatever. It's not important. The story itself is kind of shitty in that they've been going forward and back with Valve to basically find out why do you keep stopping us from getting on the store. Like we can point out to all of these other games that are like so much worse than what we're doing, but they keep pushing back on this. And it's mostly this article, and why I'm bringing it up is mostly to highlight that there is no, not just Valve, but there is no like codified standard for what pornography is. It's why the People versus Larry Flint thing, the Hustler is like shouldn't be sold because it's, you know, or not unethical but immoral or whatever. The whole big thing back in the 70s, the 80s or whatever it was, and the whole case was based off of defined pornography without it also falling into art. Oh god, that was a terrible one, I think. But there's no way to separate pornography from artistic work. Like no matter what way you define both of them, they overlap. Like there's no way to do it, or at least they couldn't come up with an argument for it, which is why it was allowed to continue selling, which is why like there's a big like the industry and whatever and so on. Same for the porn industry in general. It's that there's no way to separate the two of them. It is artistic work. People find merit in it. People, you know, there is a demand for it and so on. So having Valve or Twitch, YouTube, PlayStation, Xbox, all of them, Netflix, Amazon, whoever it is, they have no codified thing for what it means. It's basically, I know it when I see it, which is not a good way to moderate something. It's certainly not a good way to auto-moderate something, because you can't tell the computer. You need to be able to tell the system, like an AI system or a flagging system, a content matching system. You need to be able to tell it what it is, what exactly it's looking for. And you can't, because it's, I know it when I see it. I know what the difference, like if you look at someone and say, is this porn or is it art? And I think most people would find it difficult to, in actual words, tell you, but you could definitely point, that's art, that's porn, that's art, that's porn, that's art, whatever. You could definitely do it because you know it when you see it. You can't tell a computer that. The computer doesn't know that because the computer doesn't act, like technically it doesn't see anything. It doesn't have that process in its head where it can distinguish them. So it can't do that, which means auto moderation isn't going to work, which means people need to review it, and then people will have differing opinions on what they think pornography is and what art is. So they don't have a thorough moderation practice for what it is. This isn't even going into the like the granny state or the nanny state of holding your hand. Oh, you can't see a boob. Oh, they might see a boob. Oh no. But it's okay if this guy gets his head blown off. That's fine. It's like the prudish nature of America, really, in general. And they export it across the world. But it's also pointing out in this article that Valve in itself has tons of these games on it. Now, they're not at least I can't think of any, and I have definitely searched. I can't think of any that have like super high definition photogrammetry scans of actual sex workers. Like, this is probably the most ethical way to do it. They have their own rights about their own image. They take control of how they are appearing in the game, or what situations they appear in, and so on. Versus like the rape game that's on fucking, or was, not anymore, but like you could find it. There's plenty of them that are like it. It's like there's a lot of things that are like peep shows or non-consensual stuff on Steam, on itch, on a lot of them. That for whatever reason they're allowed through the moderation practice, but they're not. For whatever reason they're pushing back on this one and on similar games like it. Probably it's because of the photogrammetry stuff, just because it's so close to the real person. Some stuff pointed out, like in different different tweets by the developer themselves. They're pointing out like it's not okay for them to appear in this game, but would it be okay for them to have their appearance in Cyberpunk or something, and they have their boobs out in that? But it's okay there for whatever reason, but it's not okay if it's like specifically this kind of game. It's just it's double standards, and then also not being able to apply a standard, and then when they actually ask you what the standard is, they don't have an answer for you, or they just straight up ignore you because fuck you. There's still a long way to go on what we can actually put into video games. It's just a thing. It's not just like it's porn, but there's like plenty of other stuff that doesn't end up in video games just for whatever reason. So this article by Chris Bratt, who actually works on a really good video essay thing called People Make Games. It's over on YouTube. He has a contributing article here. So there was a follow-up thing where they did an article on how game publishers export crunch. So they send it to developers overseas who might have laxer labor laws and so on, so they can push crunch onto them rather than pushing crunch onto their own developers. They did a really good video on that. And the kind of pushback on it was that that's the thing, the company never asked for it being overtime work. Therefore, they do not have to pay for the overtime, but we weren't given enough time to actually complete the task. So there's obviously a big, there's a mismanagement issue there. There's management signing up for deadlines that are impossible to make, and then in order to keep the client happy, in order to keep the contract and so on, they basically have to force people who had no say on the deadline, who were probably not even consulted on it, but they're forced to pay for it. So if a company like Lemon Sky or Brandoville, who were involved in the video, was to demand a more substantial budget or a longer deadline in order to prioritize its employees' well-being, it then ran the risk of being undercut by another outsourcing studio that wouldn't. So this is a sort of, if one company decides to stand up for its workers, they go out of business. Which is obviously shit. Something needs to change there. But they had, there's an external development summit that happened this week. It's like the 9th one that they've held, where basically they talk about this kind of stuff, where development is pushed outside of whatever the first party is. So they push it overseas typically. And they had a talk where they were talking about outsourcing crunch. And the CEO of Brandoville, who were involved in the video, basically say he didn't agree that they were outsourcing crunch. In fact, these relationships had led to more opportunities and careers for game developers in countries like Indonesia, which, as Chris Pratt points out, that is not an answer to the question you were asked. Are you outsourcing crunch or not? Or are the, not them, sorry, the company that they contract for are outsourcing crunch. Earlier that year, in that video, they spoke to current and former Brandoville employees who described the workplace culture in which unpaid overtime during their evenings and weekends was considered the norm. You have to do it or leave. I work overtime almost every day, between 10 and 30 hours per week of overtime. You are not treated as human, you're just treated as a disposable artist. I'm not going back. That's not good. That's like former employees of that CEO who said there's fantastic opportunities for developers. Asked how does he compensate people for doing overtime work? He says, we have benefits. We make sure there's Saturdays and days off. We make sure there's Saturdays. He by himself is responsible for the concept of Saturday. I'm sure that's not what he meant. I'm sure he means that Saturdays are a day off, and hopefully Sunday as well. Typically, that's like legally required that the weekend be a day off, unless they're being paid specifically for overtime. We have holidays. During Christmas, we shut down the server, yada yada yada. Christmas is a public holiday where they're based. Again, legally required. These aren't benefits. These are legally required to happen. We have extra resources to cover unexpected overtime. It's not unexpected overtime is the problem. It's almost expected overtime. So do those resources also cover expected overtime? And are those resources, pay? What are they? Or are they business hammocks? Or like 5-hour energy or something? We have a pizza night, guys. Great. I haven't seen my kids in over 6 years because I'm stuck working here, but thanks for the pizza, I guess. Based on our own reportings, Chris Pratt for People My Games, we understand that Brandoville employees are rarely paid for their extra hours they work, as it's considered a voluntary action on behalf of the worker. There's an email chain where employees were scolded for agreeing to take an extra day off in exchange for working a public holiday. They were told to turn this offer down and then send a message to their other colleagues explaining that it was their pleasure to work hard. Get fucked. Holy shit. Anyway, there's some of the talking heads in this panel that came out to say that if we're crunching indefinitely, we're making that a default. You can't go home. You're making like 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. It's not acceptable, but it's considered the default. But we've got used to saying it's the game industry, so you crunch. When pushed for coming up with like solutions, they only had like phrases, platitudes. Got to put your foot down. You got to prepare ahead of time. Make sure you do the good management and so on. These aren't solutions. You need concrete steps on how you're gonna fix it. Chris went on to kind of follow up people who were in the video, asking them what they thought of the summit, and specifically the Brandoville CEO. It's Ken's views, which is the Roundup CEO, on overtime effectively pins the blame on the artist's lack of abilities or the client's underestimation of the workload, not on his own management ability. Like, not on him fucking over his own employees so he can make more money. Both things should be monitored by the project management, client, marketing, and higher-ups. So it's like, you're well aware this is happening, and you're not doing anything about it. He uses it to just promote Brandoville and try to dispel what the video exposed. So it's like trying to save face from what this People My Games video showed up. Like, crunch is well known in the industry, and they really just make platitudes to try and fix it. Like, no one's actually really interested in doing it. Except for the developers. Like, obviously the people who are hit by it, they care. Everyone else, no. I'm just, like, if you make a big enough stink about it, I'm going to fire you. And I'll hire someone straight out of college who won't complain. That's why you guys got to get a union. Get on that union shit, guys. Okay, so dumb stuff. We are once again sponsored by Capcom. Capcom, send me a hoodie or something. I could do with a new one. We've only got one thing here, and it's just mods for Resident Evil 8. Somebody swapped the heads around on Chris Redfield and Ethan Winter's baby. Chris head on the baby, and then they put the baby head on Chris, which is nightmare fuel and horrible. There are also a bunch of other mods that we kind of showed off last week, where Thomas the Tank Engine replaced Lady Dimitrescu, and Barney replaced a bunch of other enemies. There's one where Dante shows up for whatever fucking reason instead of Chris Redfield. And there's people who've like just subbed out Mr. X for Lady Dimitrescu and just swapped them around, so it's Mr. X who's running around the place. I don't know. It's funny and it's interesting still. But yeah, that's the news for 10th to 18th of May 2021. Not a ton of news this week for whatever reason, or at least not a ton of news that I'm particularly interested in. There's some stuff about how E3 is going to work. They're going to have a new app thing because obviously nobody can attend, or not that nobody can attend, it's that it's specifically a virtual event. So they've gone through what that app will have in it. We have like videos and leaderboards, so for whatever reason I'm not sure how that's going to work, but whatever. There's some news that Ghost Runner is getting a sequel, which is good, because that game is, despite being really fucking hard, is a really well made game. Glad it's getting a sequel. Probably won't play it because it's way too hard, but good for them. There's some news that Hades might be coming to PS4 based on a South Korean ratings board. It's not confirmed, so maybe. I think that's it. Nothing major, nothing earth-shattering, really. They can't all have, incredible news stories, I suppose. Elsewhere on the channel, you might notice on the side there that the Games of February is in the latest column now, so that video is not currently out at time of recording, and actually probably still won't be out at time of publishing of this video, but it will be out later that day. It's finally finished. I'll be moving on to the Games of March that I haven't quite decided on. I'll be doing Atelier Ryza 2, which is a kind of wholesome, sort of chill alchemy JRPG kind of thing. We'll be looking at Yakuza Like a Dragon, which is Yakuza. So it's a somewhat sandbox Japanese slice of life, but combat is typically real time in the Yakuza series, but in Like a Dragon it is turn-based. And according to Ryuga Gotoku, the studio behind the Yakuza series, the Yakuza series is basically going to be turn-based from now on, and the Judgment spin-off series will continue the real-time action side of things. We'll also be looking at a game called Maquette, which is a puzzle game where you have a scale model of the area you're in, and if you move items around in that scale model, the items outside will also move. And also you are inside a scale model yourself, so even further outside on that scale, objects will move and stuff like that. So it's managing to fix or to traverse and solve puzzles that way. Like you might pick up a small item in the scale model and place it so that it makes a nice ramp in the scale model, and you turn around and now you have a massive ramp that you can walk over and jump into like another wall or something like that, and end up in the even bigger world where you're now tiny and you can fit through a small gap or something like that. It's an interesting concept, and I'm looking forward to playing it. And then the fourth game, I don't know. I was thinking Bravely Default 2, which is it's a nice JRPG game, but that would be, well, one, it would be two JRPGs in the same video, and then otherwise it would be three giant games. Like, I don't imagine Maquette is that big a game. You can only stretch that concept so far before the console can't actually handle it. But Yakuza Like a Dragon and Atelier Ryza 2 are both fairly lengthy games. And then if to put Bravely Default 2 on top of that, it's gonna take me a while. You might never see the March video. So I don't know. I might swap Bravely Default 2 for something else. I just don't know what it is yet. As I mentioned in the February video, if you do get around to watching it, I am looking to move back into Let's Plays and live streaming. I just don't know what game to do it with. I'm thinking Monster Hunter for live streams, just because it's a fairly beefy game. It's something I want to play. It doesn't make for a great LP, but I think it makes for a good stream game. As for LPs, I don't know. It's more for like heavily like narrative based games. I was thinking a Plague's Tale. But we'll see. Anyway, that's the video. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you thought, and I'll see you guys next time.